This CMS safety video will address confined space hazards and permit requirements. As a result of this course, employees should understand the hazards of confined spaces and the procedures to work safely in and around them. Understand permit-required confined space, permit systems, duties and responsibilities of employees. A confined space is a space that is large enough and configured so an employee can enter the space and provide work. Has limited or restricted means for entry or exit and is not designated for continuous occupancy. Confined spaces include silos, vaults, pits, and vessels. Boilers and boiler rooms in industrial applications. Storage tanks and vats for liquids and gases. Excavations below ground can quickly flood or collapse. Enclosed trenches form confined spaces with restricted access. Confined spaces include harmful dust or gases, asphyxiation, submersion in liquids, or free-flowing granular solids, electrocution, or entrapment. Hazardous substances can be introduced into a confined space for various reasons, such as residuals from a previous processing operation or storage facility. The disturbance of sludge, other deposits, or seepage from an adjacent plant. Formed because of the work processes, being released from the underscale and brickwork. Effects include impaired judgment, unconsciousness, and death. Anyone who enters confined spaces poses a health and safety risk. Materials and substances are affected by their design, construction, location, or atmosphere. Work activities being carried out in it, or the mechanical, process, and safety hazards presented. Workers are injured and killed each year while working in confined spaces. An estimated 60% of the fatalities have been among the would-be rescuers. The leading cause of death in a confined space is asphyxiation. Poor air quality hazards occur when there's insufficient oxygen for the worker to breathe. The atmosphere might contain a poisonous substance that causes workers to lose consciousness or become ill. Natural ventilation alone is often insufficient to maintain breathable quality air. Natural ventilation occurs when a space is left open, and the natural airflow sweeps away toxic gases and maintains a safe oxygen level. A mechanical ventilation system uses fans or ventilation machines to ventilate an area. It is necessary to maintain the air quality in spaces where welding or other activities can create fumes. Process-related hazards include residual chemicals and the release of contents of a supply line. Hazards include moving equipment parts, structural hazards, entanglement, slips, falls, radiation, and noise. There is a possibility that welding gases, such as acetylene, oxygen, argon, and helium, may enter a confined space. These factors can threaten an employee's life, including extreme temperatures, barrier failure, uncontrolled energy, and electrical shock. Before work begins, the hazard assessment must consider that the entrance/exit of the confined space must allow the worker to get out in time should there be a flood or collapse of free-flowing solid. Configuration must consider the confined space for the possibility of a self-rescue. Ensuring the confined space allows movement and proper ventilation is sufficient to maintain breathable quality air. A safe atmosphere can be created by flooding the confined space with an inert gas, which removes the oxygen needed to ignite flammable materials. Removing hazardous materials can also include draining and triple rinsing with water. Eliminating contaminants inside confined spaces by displacement with air to achieve acceptable atmospheric levels. Using air purifiers to eliminate unwanted materials from the air. Hazardous atmospheres must be tested for oxygen content, combustibility, flammability, and toxic atmospheres in the confined space. The entrant must observe the monitoring procedure for engulfment gases, oxygen deficiency levels of 19.5% or less, oxygen enrichment levels of 23.5% or more, and flammable gases or toxic vapors above 10%. Various factors can cause the lack of oxygen in a confined space. Displacement of air by another gas. The decay of organic matter, the rusting of metals, and the burning of organic matter are examples of biological processes. The absorption of air onto steel surfaces, especially in damp conditions. Oxygen enrichment is an excess of oxygen in the presence of combustible materials, which increases the risk of fire and explosion. Some materials that do not burn in the air may burn vigorously or spontaneously in an enriched oxygen atmosphere. The confined space permit should be filled out before work begins at the location, including atmospheric monitoring, and conducted from outside of the confined space. In cases where respiratory protection is needed to keep employees safe, All employees will be adequately fit tested and trained in respiratory use before performing the work in locations where a confined space permit is needed. A competent employee or supervisor will post the permit no more than 2 feet away from the entry to the space. Supervisors are responsible for conducting a pre-entry briefing and ensuring permits are completed and removed at the end of the project. Overseeing all activities in confined spaces, including evacuation procedures when necessary, the return of equipment to its proper location, and equipment maintenance. Attendants are responsible for attending the pre-entry briefing of a confined space, knowing the hazards, controlling access, maintaining communication with entrants, and not entering the space for rescue. And assisting rescue efforts outside the confined space, ordering an evacuation when conditions warrant, keeping an accurate count of entrants and remaining at the site inside. Non-permit required spaces include utility closets, below-grade trenches, storage vaults, and utility sub-basements. Entrant responsibilities include attending the pre-entry briefing, knowing the space hazards, and correctly using appropriate equipment. Exit the confined space if an alarm is activated. Communication is lost, or unknown exposures are encountered or ordered to do so. Authorized person responsibilities must familiarize themselves with the characteristics of the confined space. Verify that all hazards and sources of energy have been controlled. Ensure that a confined space permit is posted and rescind any permit for non-compliance with permit requirements. Rescuer responsibilities include understanding the hazards of the confined space and being certified in emergency first aid and CPR. Understanding the appropriate entry procedures and how to use rescue equipment. Conducting rescue drills annually helps prepare teams for working in confined spaces and rescuing coworkers when necessary. Rescue equipment includes harnesses, and retrieval lines must be used so that an employee can safely be retrieved from a space without putting others at risk. A mechanical hoisting device shall be available to retrieve personnel from vertical type permit spaces more than 5 feet deep. Rescue equipment includes harnesses, and retrieval lines must be used so that an employee can safely be retrieved from a space without putting others at risk. A mechanical hoisting device shall be available to retrieve personnel from vertical type permit spaces more than 5 feet deep. Performing a safe confined space entry includes: perform all hazard assessments and JSAs. Determine testing procedures for hazardous gases that are suspected to be present. Test for appropriate levels of oxygen, flammable gases, and explosive agents. A written risk assessment must be completed prior to entry by a competent person with the right knowledge and skills of all the possible risks of entering, or working in or near, a confined space, including reviewing and revising it when necessary. Thank you for watching this effective confined space meeting. CMS Management's mission is to provide the best product, provide the best service, and offer the best rates. We are family-owned and operated.